and she was always praying for Carlos and his brothers and sisters. Although Carlos wouldn't consider himself too religious, he had turned to God throughout his childhood for strength in the midst of all his family's troubles. If asked, he would say he was spiritual, and if push came to shove, he'd say Catholic. The drive up to the Bay Area from La Puente was like a dream for Carlos. He had taken a few road trips to Tijuana and San Diego, but other than that, he hadn't journeyed outside of LA. He decided to take the scenic route on the Pacific Coast Highway, and on the way up he stopped at beautiful Carmel and Monterey Bay. He loved it so much. It was like a new world opening up. While walking around the town of Carmel, he got a few weird stares from white people, but for the most part it was an amazing trip. As an ethnic studies major at Berkeley, Carlos learned about Chicana and Chicano history in the United States. His professor taught him about the unjust Mexican-American War, which was justified by the strange idea of manifest destiny. According to manifest destiny, many Anglo-Americans in the 19th century believed that God had ordained them to conquer the Native Americans and Mexicans who lived in what is now Texas, California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, and Utah. God's destiny for them was to seize these Western territories so that they could spread their version of democracy and Christianity. Carlos also read about the segregation of Mexicans in housing, education, juries, parks, and pools during the era of Jim Crow segregation. He was inspired to learn about the many ways in which Mexican Americans successfully challenged segregation as part of cases such as Mendez v. Westminster and Hernandez v. Texas. He was especially inspired to read about the Chicana and Chicano civil rights movement of the 1960s and such civil rights heroes as Dolores Huerta, Cesar Chavez, and Corky Gonzalez. Like Rosa, however, he was told that Christianity was one of the main sources of historical oppression of Chicanas and Chicanos. Also like Rosa, he didn't know what to do with it all. So he stopped attending Mass and declared himself a Marxist and atheist. Edwin was a PK, pastor's kid. His parents immigrated to the United States from Central America to escape gang violence and the poverty that has eclipsed El Salvador in the wake of its brutal civil war. Edwin's dad was the pastor of a Pentecostal church in Pico Union, and Edwin grew up playing piano on the church worship team. Wanting to shield Edwin from some of the worldly teachings that he might encounter at a public university, Jorge instead decided to enroll him in the local Christian college. Arriving in the freshman dorms, Edwin felt a little uncomfortable, because none of his roommates were Latino, and they all came from fairly privileged middle-class backgrounds. They were nice, though, and after a short while they started hanging out in the cafeteria and going to the movies, and they became friends. The first year was going pretty well until one tragic day in May 2019. Edwin had been up late studying for finals one night when he received a phone call that would change his life forever. It was his 14-year-old sister Angelica. In tears, she reported to him that their mother and father had just been arrested by ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they were going to be deported. Edwin's family had fled to the United States as refugees because the Maras, gangs in El Salvador, had targeted Jorge for recruitment, shot their uncle, and burned his grandfather's house down. Because they did not have enough money to hire an immigration lawyer, however, they were unable to prove to ICE that they qualified for asylum. As a result, they were being deported according to President Trump's draconian immigration policies. After hearing the terrible news, Edwin fell to his knees and prayed to God for strength and for the safety of his parents. A million questions raced through his mind. Would his mom and dad be safe while in custody with ICE? Could he talk to them? Did they have any legal recourse to block their deportation? When would he see them again? Who would take care of his young sister? Fortunately, when the raid occurred, Angelica was at their aunt's house and was not apprehended by ICE. Where would she now live? How would he support her? Would he be able to stay in college? Because their family's asylum application had been denied, Edwin and Angelica were also both subject to deportation. After a restless and sleepless night, Edwin stumbled into his political science class the next morning. The topic of the presidential elections came up. One of his classmates said,